welcome to EyeOpener, powered by Siemens. And now, please welcome your host, Gugan Sanger.
Yeah, and I was going to say, I guess you probably get that feedback from customers because you're speaking to them. So if there's an issue or if there's something that they encounter, and I guess because you've built that relationship with them, you can then feed that to the product team and say, hey, like you need to fix this, or you need to work on this element of the app.
Exactly. I found it really interesting listening to what Adam was saying last time, because I found it quite easy to relate to in terms of the same struggles. Yeah. And I think a part of our role that's quite important as well is to be, we support our customers internally in terms of where they're face of their needs and what things that need to be progressed for them. Yeah. And I take that role of quite high importance, right? I'm their voice within the company to some degree to say this is a problem for them, this is something I need fixed. And that's something I take to Adam or Jacob or Dan or their team and say, what kind of solutions can we look at to get this done, and what kind of timescales, that kind of thing we're looking at. Talk about yourself, because in the first few weeks, anything you've seen in the app?
Well, I think I've noticed that communication between us and the customer, with the customer, and also our product side of things is actually, the back end side of things is actually really good, because they pay attention to what the customers need. And it's something that it's nice to see when one customer has an issue or comes across something. It's not just normally one person, and it's always ways of improving the app. So that's what we really want to do, isn't it? It's make it the best form of the app can be, or the best version of the app. So
I think one of the craziest things I sometimes see is you come across a suggestion from one customer, and then another customer, maybe if you mention it in passing, they'll say, actually, I agree with that. That's the exact same thing. And you find out these problems that are actually shared across a group of users, and that's the really important stuff. And it really takes that kind of user feedback to hear about that and make sure that gets to the product team. Yeah, no,
it's so true. It's when I was discussing with Adam, and Adam mentioned, sometimes from the product team, we wouldn't see something as an issue until a customer says it to us, and sometimes you just don't even you're oblivious to that, and then you sometimes you kind of step back. You're just like, actually, you know what? That's a fair point, because the customers are the ones who are using the app. Yeah. So you want to make sure that you're doing everything to make sure that they can use it and accommodate to their needs.
Yeah. And there's so many things that we don't use it for.
Yes.
That they would. So we might not actually have the same pains that they do when it comes to it. Yeah. So it's always good for them to point it out to us and let us know, and then at least we can make it better for them.
And as Adam was saying last week, it can be really vital to see the actual user journey they go through. Yeah. And that's something we get quite a specialised insight into, because we do weekly case reviews or bi-weekly case reviews with a lot of our customers to look at the cases. Yeah. And as part of that, we tend to ask them to share their screen, and they'll run through their process, right? They'll run through all the stuff that they do on a day-to-day and list through all the stuff, and you actually get insight into what their workflow looks like. And that's really valuable to us, because one of the keys to the app and usage of the system in general is making sure that their workflow fits into how we present data.
Yeah, that's perfect. So I know you touched on, so you have weekly calls with customers. And I guess that kind of reinforces the whole communication, right? Because you get to check in with them every week. So if there's any concerns, then you've got that time to speak to them and address those issues.
Yeah, so we tend to put in a weekly or a bi-weekly case review, and that's very vital, I think, in the first early stages of the project. As customers get more and more self-sufficient, we tend to scale them back. So you tend to just have, maybe more of a bi-monthly or a quarterly catch-up. But especially in the first early deployment of a project, really those weekly case reviews are your touch point with the customer to hear all of their pains, all the good things that are happening, and be able to take away the things that you hear from them and, work on them and improve them. Whether they're things related to data that you can assist with by going through their, helping them get in touch with their IT team, or even features in the app that we can, use to make their lives easier. Is there anything, you've been to a couple of case reviews now?
Yeah,
I was just going to say.
Yeah, I've been to a few, and it's exactly what you said. It's good to be able to see what they're working on, what their main focus is as well. So if they really want to focus on a particular area of the factory, it's always good to be able to know that, so that whenever we see an issue in that, we can either let them know or we can try and make something better for them in that area.
Yeah.
So it's always good to be able to do that. And also if they're actually having, like Jack said, any issues, we can kind of iron them out for them there and then, or let them know that we'll have it done by the time we have the next meeting.
Oh, that's perfect. So just touching on, so I know obviously we spoke about customers, and we've touched on kind of having your kind of weekly calls, bi-weekly calls with them. Do you ever, and I guess I know Susan, as mentioned, I know you're very new to the role, so I just wanted to touch on, do you ever kind of go to customers and have the site visits to understand? I'm just trying to understand from a perspective, you know, to see if there is an issue kind of live.
Yeah.
Are you able to do that, and how that works?
Yeah, so we're very much a remote company first.
Yeah.
So a lot of our stuff is done remotely, but especially at the beginning of a project.
Yeah.
I think one of the key processes we have is to get on site with a customer.
Okay.
Sit down with them, have a face-to-face, get everyone that needs to be involved in the room.
Yeah.
Where possible, obviously over COVID that definitely wasn't possible. But get into a room with them, get face-to-face, walk the line, right? See the assets. One of the things we sometimes forget is every environment's very different.
Yep.
That you really don't have a feel for until you've walked the line, you've seen what's the assets and you've seen them in production.
Yeah, yeah.
And sometimes it helps you give those prompts to facilitate conversations about where is the most value, what information do you need to know. I know you've recently been on your first site visit, so is there anything you want to add to that?
Yes, I have. Well, my first site visit was very interesting, and it was really nice to actually go and see exactly what we were dealing with, because for me, I was seeing everything remotely, so it was just on the app, so it was seeing the assets and the sensors just as a label, really. So it was really nice to actually be able to walk a line and see the actual assets and, you know, what they actually have to deal with and everything like that. And it was really nice to actually speak with the people as well that were there and see what issues they were having and anything like that they were interested in. So yeah, it was good to see. It was because I've never been to a factory before. It was like the first time. Yeah. So it was quite nice to be able to see exactly, well, first of all, the sheer size of the things, like the machines, they're massive. And I wouldn't want to be near any of them if anything ever went wrong. Like it was,
I was going to say,
but it was nice to see.
It probably helps you to understand, because like you mentioned, when you see it in the app, you kind of just see. You kind of see what the issue is and what's going wrong. But I guess when you see an asset live, you're just like, well, okay, wow. Like you kind of actually, like face to face with it, aren't you? Yeah. Essentially. So I get your point of not wanting to be too close to it.
It's like a happy medium.
Yeah, right? Let's just keep the distance.
Now I'm okay with just looking at it like on the app.
And I think one of the best things about doing a line walk with customers is, it makes it a lot easier for them to discuss where their problems are. As you walk down a factory floor, a lot of customers tend to be quite open about, well, this asset causes a lot of issues. This is the kind of things we face. This is, where we'd like to have something like Senseye. And you also see areas where maybe there isn't a business case, where they say, okay, this asset fails, every 10 years. It's not worthwhile to us. And it really helps you focus in on the areas that the customer really says, these are the priorities. And what data you need for that.
So Jack, I know you mentioned you've been to quite a few site visits, and I'm just curious to know, what was your first interaction with a customer and how that was?
Yeah, so when I first joined Senseye, was in the middle of lockdown, but I was put onto a project that was quite new at the time.
Okay.
And I think it was only about a year or so later I actually got to visit their site in the flesh. Yeah. Which was really, really interesting, because I had quite a lot of theoretical knowledge about this customer.
Okay.
Theoreticals about how their line worked, how all these things interplayed, what stuff was really important, what stuff wasn't. And being able to go onto site and actually see that in the flesh was really, really interesting.
Yeah.
And I think one of the most valuable experiences I got from that is, I'd been working remote for all this time, being able to sit down with a group of maintenance people and you walk through the line, talk about all the issues they have, everything that's going on, and what's their importance day to day, what value do they put on different things, what's going on in their head that sometimes can be quite hard to extract. I think my first interaction was really, and I'm sure Susan will probably say something similar, it's quite an eye-opener into, how things work. And especially us two, maybe not coming from the pure engineering disciplines. It's an education as well, right? Really learning about, what these maintenance teams care about, what's important to them.
I guess coming into the role during COVID, and you mentioned you had all this theoretical knowledge around the customer and the issue, and then actually kind of going to see the site in action. You mentioned a year. Was it a year later?
It was about a year and a half later. Was the first time I saw one of these lines. And in fact, at that point, I deployed to two more sites. Right.
Oh wow. Okay.
So I'd kind of done a repeat. Right. I'd gone through this process a few times with different different pieces of machinery, and then to actually get to go to the site and see that was really, really interesting.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I know you mentioned, Susan, from your perspective, going to a site visit, that was just, I guess, a very different experience for you because...
Yeah, it was. I mean, it was the first time that I'd been in that kind of environment. And like Jack said, it was kind of nice to be able to actually see it. And it is an education in itself because you're learning about different things, like different machines, how they work, how they could break down, people's roles in the factory and everything like that. So it's quite an interesting field to go into because that on each project you're going to be learning something brand new each time. So it's really good when you're really a curious person. I think if you're into like learning new things, it's great.
I guess that's what I was also gonna touch on. I guess with all the different customers that you guys deal with, there is no kind of one size fits all, right? Because it's a case by case.
I'd say there's no one size fits all. You can't take the same deployment and move it to an entirely different factory. What is, I think, we found to be more one size fits all is the methodology you go through that with. Which I'm sure may have been mentioned before, but Omniverse is something we've been defining. We're still working on is making our methodology rigorous. And the key to that is, there are reproducible steps in here about, identifying the business case, identifying data, etc. There's different variances around that, and there's different ways you can input the knowledge and the experience we've gained into that process. But I think the key steps to actually deploying a project are very similar. It's just maybe the details that change from site to site, and what you have to learn to be able to understand a customer's process is very different. But you can apply kind of a broad band of skills to that entire process that we develop as a team, right? And I think that's one of the things we aim to do for our customers, right? Is obviously a lot of them that this will maybe their first, digital transformation project, or the first time looking at predictive maintenance in that space. So being able to come in with our experience and knowledge of these steps and guide them through this process and facilitate them giving us the details we need while we guide them through the broader strokes, right? The larger steps, so that they can have a successful deployment. And then, the real hope is we are able to educate them enough so they could take that away themselves and they could roll things out on their own and understand how they can deploy Senseye, find the value and have a successful project, kind of taking on the part of ourselves, right?
To find out more, search Senseye Predictive Maintenance.